So Stephanie, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you for having me. So excited, Bill.
Well, I'm very excited about this because you come highly recommended as a coach. And how would you define yourself? Do you define yourself when someone at a cocktail party, or how do you say what you do?
Yeah. So how I describe what we do is that we get to work with ambitious, fast-growing, scaling companies when they have the messy middle, the growing pains, because everyone loves to put the great plans on paper at the beginning, and they want the results at the end, which is usually more money, more prestige, more clients. But in between the beginning plans on paper and the results is a lot of messy middle with your people. And we know how to fix why they get themselves on board, why they change, why they don't. And we wrap that up into change management coaching with executives and teams and mid-level leaders.
Well, that's great. I mean, we're actually going through a lot of that at Red Zone now, and it's really interesting. We're the model that we're using is really facilitating decision making at the top, and it's quite. After doing this 21 years, you just never. There's always room for refinement and improvement on having meetings, how to structure meetings, and gosh, man, it's a big deal. And so we were talking a little bit prior to this, and as you know, a lot of the people that listen to me are going to be your IT executives, your CIOs, your business IT leaders. And what are you finding with leaders these days that are kind of the you mentioned the middle mess? What is happening that is it's an opportunity for you and your organization to work for people to solve their particular challenges?
Yeah. What I'm seeing from my folks, both when they're trying to determine do they want to choose us to work with them, as well as in our direct work together, is a sense of analysis paralysis, avoiding the actual hard, real, or bold decision that teams need to make right now. And, I think we can chalk that up to some bigger picture economic factors. We can chalk that up to a fear and uncertainty around how to manage our people in this new environment. As all these expectations are just changing so radically, it's just a lot of stalling out of decisions. And I'm seeing a lot of leaders trying to use this consensus model of decision making, which is, in my opinion, the fastest way to get nothing done. And just for those just to level set definitions, consensus decision making is when you wait on everyone to agree on what the answer is before you move forward. Sometimes it can be helpful. And by sometimes, I mean about 2% of the time, because you do need everyone to buy in. But the ramification is that it's very slow. It's also very, very safe, both politically and in terms of the decision. So committees do not make bold decisions. And so the more you get people to weigh in and wait for their agreement before you move forward on what that decision is, you slow it down, you water it down. And I think, especially for folks that want to run a high performing team, hard times call for bold decisions and big decisions and sticking to your guns when it's necessary, even when it's hard. And so relying on consensus is, frankly, I think the complete opposite of all of that. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't get people's buy-in or let them weigh into the decision. You definitely want to listen to different perspectives, but there's so many other decision-making models that can actually bring you the best decision, a bold decision, and let the right person make the decision. And that could be the person with the biggest title. That makes sense, right? Like relying on hierarchy, relying on experience inside of the organization. That person with the largest title, they do need to make those decisions. That's A-okay. Sometimes the exact opposite is true, where you need the person who's closest to the problem, who's usually the person with the smallest title.
Yeah.
You need them to make the decision because they're impacted by it every single day and they see the problem up close and personal. And so then there's other models you can use there. I'll stop there for a second, but we need to, as leaders, broaden our skill set when it comes to who makes the decision, how do they make it, who's involved, so that our organizations can continue to grow, broaden, deepen in services, whatever your business plan is calling for.
So with consensus decision making, another word that popped in my head was kind of politicking, where we're sort of. I'm wondering what's the genesis of that. You mentioned fear, and I'm wondering if it's just. I mean, culturally, it seems people are this generally very, very sensitive these days, as far as maybe leaders are being oversensitive to maybe that's just being oversensitive, and maybe and I'm just wondering how you can gather consensus from everybody, but what about someone that has to make a decision? Like, how does someone approach this? Because I think I think a lot of politically now, it's like you sort of like when you read the media and such, it's like we got to get everybody involved and everybody's opinion. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying, there's a difference between everybody's opinion and actually someone stepping forward and saying, all right, we've gathered everybody's opinion. This is the decision to move forward. Is that still imperative with leaders?
Yeah, I think the tension that a lot of leaders feel, if I may kind of unpack this sensitivity, there's definitely a call towards more inclusion in our workplaces, which I would argue is an amazing thing, right? Like just being sensitive to neurodiversity, especially in the IT realm, being sensitive to gender dynamics and situations like that. Like we want people to feel like they belong. And so for those of us who have been in the power group for a long time, sometimes that means thinking about our language choice in certain situations and our actions and the impact. The other thing that I have noticed is as millennials came into the workforce and are now growing into the workforce, approaching their 40s and their early 40s, 10, 20 years ago, our organizations were very hierarchical, and that was by design by the silent generation, the greatest generation, baby boomers, and then by default, Gen Xers. Gen Xers are very respectful of the hierarchy, while also having a certain level of detachment to it, but that's another topic for another day. But those four groups have shaped our modern workforce up until about 10 years ago.
What were the four groups again? There was
silent generation. Greatest generation, I think. Yep. And then baby boomers. So the folks, 45 to 65, born 1945 to 1965 or so. And then Gen Xers are 65 to 80, 83, depending on whose range you use. Yep. And then millennials are 83 to about 2003. Born. And then now we also have Gen Zs in the workplace. So our millennials, so baby boomers, Gen Xers grew up in homes where you had a fear-based respect of your parents. It's kind of the traditional parenting model. And then baby boomers and older Gen Xers raised their millennial children with more of a democratic approach. They gave them buy-in. They asked them, do you want to do, pick 2 out of the 3 sports, soccer, ballet, and lacrosse, right? Yeah. I'm just making this up. And so the kids got to pick. And so these children were raised as, no, I get a say in how my household runs. And so there's an element of democracy there. Those same expectations have been placed into the workforce. And so that is very confusing to Gen Xers and baby boomers as these millennials. And I'm not picking on these folks. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm saying these are the habits that I have seen in when you speak of generations in the workforce. This has made baby boomers and Gen Xers very uncomfortable. And they don't know when to get buy-in or how to get buy-in. And the reality is like, especially when millennials first came on the scene, like they didn't have the work experience to weigh in. They just demanded to weigh in. They demanded transparency in a new way. They demanded feedback to give it and receive it constantly. And the older generations were just like, huh? Right? Like, why would I get the intern's opinion on business strategy? Which I agree with. And so I share with all of my clients, there are new ways for you to be more transparent in your company in a way that makes sense for your business and your ownership model. I'm all for that. And at the same time, there's also an opportunity for you to educate all staff at all levels about how decisions get made in your company and who is best to provide insight so that they can be made. And you just have to push back because there's a lack of self-awareness in all three of those generations about their expectations around hierarchy, political power, influence, how decisions get made, that if you can just, I hope, one of my goals is to help people understand those nuances that create friction every single day, because that's how I see it being played out. And when you think about change management principles, oftentimes our top level leaders need to do a much better job of communicating the why behind change, the what of change, the how of change, because we're doing it with 2 or 3 messages, 1 or 2 channels. And my thought is, and the tool that I teach is 7 by 7 by 7.
Okay.
7 messages, 7 channels, 7 times.
That's an interesting one because that's what and I know we just got connected through another person, and we're using a model and a methodology, but the same thing that we're being coached up on is 7, which is really frustrating. Yeah. It's really annoying.
It's a really big number.
For me, I grew up. You had one time, and you better get it right one time. I'm not coming back. So. I was moving towards the target, and it's probably me as an entrepreneur as well, but I was moving as soon as I heard, it was like fire, 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 fire until you hit the target, not needing like multiple data points. So that's something that I've had to adjust and expectations around. But you're right. I mean, from a habit building perspective, even building personal habits, can take, I think people say 30 days. I think it takes more like 3 months, but it's that's a long time just to get habits and patterns in place. So it makes sense 7.
Yeah. And it's, the reality is that even when you were coming up in the workplace, it took you 7 times. This is part of like how the human brain works.
Sure.
It just got delivered to you differently. And your sense of hierarchy kind of puts you on point to pay attention a lot more. So
the 7, what's the 777? I missed I'm sorry, I didn't jumped in when you were just explaining it.
I know, because you were like, no, 7's too much. I can read your internal thoughts already, Bill. We're that good of friends. So I advocate for 7 messages. So you frame up the how, what, why, where, components of the change or any kind of business message into 7 bite-sized chunks. Okay. And I just, use the journalistic approach, the what, why, where, when, what's the other W I'm missing real quick? And then the how. 6. Okay. The where and the how. Where. That's 6 messages right there. Right. And then you put it all into one big document. You got your 7 messages, 7 channels, meaning email, Slack, that TV display board that's in the break room, staff meeting, one-on-one meetings. There's 5 right there. Come up with 2 that work for your culture. Sure. And then you create a plan to rinse and repeat 7 times.
7 times.
Mm-hmm. And you just, do that planning up front, just schedule it out. It doesn't have to be laborious, but the repetition is the magic of making your messages stick. So
if someone wanted to not be, if someone was listening to this and was an individual leader within their company and didn't have, either the street cred to influence the CEO or was just getting started, if they wanted to have individual impact, they could basically do this within their own organization, right? They don't necessarily have to depend on, is that sort of the empowerment you're trying to establish if you don't have the view of the CEO in mind?
Oh, absolutely. I advocate that all of my leaders, regardless of title, create clarity when you need to, because your manager is not going to give you all the information. They're not going to give you all the answers because they don't have them. That's the reality, right? Especially when you're doing big, bold change or something big and new, they're not going to have all the answers. Create clarity where you can. And that forces the conversation. So even if your boss is like, well, that's not right, it's okay, well, you didn't provide me that information. And I was making my best decision based on the information that I had. But now that I have insight into your expectations, can we talk about what your expectations are? And now that you have insight into how I'm making decisions around this, let's have a better conversation about that.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. So what you're saying now from the people that you're working with, if you're coming in it from a kind of a technical orientation versus coming in it from more of an analytics perspective, do you find that people have different things you've got to coach them up on if they come from a more of a technical orientation versus I guess a more of a right brain perspective?
Yes, absolutely. So we are big fans of the DISC behavioral assessment.
Sure.
We're certified in it. I love it. It's the first time I read it, it transformed my life. And so we use it as the foundation for almost all of our work. And so the DISC has 4 components: our level of dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. Conscientiousness are our process-oriented people, our analytical friends. That's the developer on your team who's just like sits down and knocks out amazing code like nobody's business, probably
Sure.
a high C. Your S's are your people who are your team players. Let's all do it together, my friends. Your I's are the ones who are super excited about everything because they love variety, right? They're the ones that you could put on any project to get started because they're oftentimes good at quick starting, understanding next steps to take. They tend to love people. They have an enthusiasm that's magnetic. And then our D friends, the level of dominance, they're direct, they're results oriented.
Okay.
And so I help all team members understand all 4 perspectives. We have a dominant style, and then we usually have a blend of 2 other styles. And so I help people understand themselves first, and then their colleagues second, to bridge the gap in those communications. Because think of it as a 4-quadrant pie, and the people that are on the opposite sides of the pie are most likely to have that tension and that conflict without
Sure.
self-awareness, right? Like a high I who is super high affect. So like me, like I walk around with glitter and rainbow in my head and I get excited about everything all the time. And
Right.
high C's generally have a fairly low affect, and they come across as kind of like middle to low energy, where
Sure.
me, I'm like Energizer bunny looking. I walk fast, I make decisions fast, I talk fast, all that stuff. That is rife for conflict on a team because just their mere presence, just breathing next to each other, they're going to piss each other off.
Right.
And so we help people understand why you need those other styles to get
Yeah.
stuff done. I have an example to share with you with an IT team if you want to hear it.
Yeah. Love to hear it.
Okay. Yeah. So I was working with this global IT team and they were expanding from 5 to 35. And so they had their 35 in place. And the scuttlebutt with this team was, well, nothing's getting done. No one's making decisions. And I was like, well, who is that? Well, nobody. It was this vague, like, no one's making decisions. I was like, okay, that's probably a problem. Like, who's making decisions? Do you know? No. So we did the DISC exercise, and I had them stand in a corner of a room that represented their primary style. So D, results; I, enthusiasm and people focused; S, steady eddies, like what's the process, what's the plan, and how can we
Sure.
stay calm through it; and our C's, who are what's the process? What are all the tools we need? Leave me alone. Let me go do my work on my own. Right? 4 different perspectives. And I'm speaking in hyperbole. We're all humans, right? Like we all have little mixes of everything. And so as soon as we got them in the 4 quadrants, small number of I's, pretty big number of S's. Most of the group was in C's, as I would expect in an IT function. That makes all the sense in the world to me. 2 D's. 2 people out of 35 who have a natural bend towards results and getting stuff done.
Right.
And I said, guys, or sorry, not guys, but everybody, guys. I say, hey guys, because I'm from the Midwest. Okay, so why aren't you getting results done? Oh, no one's owning the results because everyone's focused through their primary lens first, except for two people. And of course,
Uh,
they were the most frustrated of the group,
right,
but
right.
they realized the part that they played in the lack of decision making because they were just sitting in their style, expecting someone else to own the decision making.
Interesting. So that's kind of like a current state that you try to achieve as basically human beings when they, in all their imperfections, you're essentially using this model, this framework to basically make sure that we at least know where we all are from our own style. You call it their own style, and then they become like 360-degree aware of themselves, and then now you use that as a baseline to move forward, to basically unhinge all of the stuck points or the stuck points within their decision making.
Yes, it's definitely a piece of it. It's not the only one, but it's the most powerful one because it can
Okay.
break down unconscious bias. It can help people understand, that they've really been interpreting other people's behaviors through their own lens and vice versa, right? We all kind of have this thing where we think, well, of course everyone would think like us. Like the way I do it is amazing and fabulous. And that's not true. It's not untrue, but it's also not true. And so just having a recognition that actually you need other people to help you make decisions, because oftentimes in American work culture, we promote the fast-paced, decision-oriented, results-oriented leader to the top of the org chart. And I would argue that's a very smart business. You need someone who's comfortable making decisions. And the other styles could equally do it with self-awareness, but the folks that naturally have that gift can do it more easily, more quickly. But the reality is folks like us who are fast-paced, fast decision makers, we sometimes ignore people at the expense of our work. And so we can come across as unempathetic or lack connection with the people that we do the work with. The folks that are super thorough in their decision making, they're super thorough in their decision making. And sometimes that is very much needed for huge investments, big pivots,
Sure.
significant situations. And sometimes that thoroughness allows you to be proactive and ward off problems before they happen. Where for those of us who like to move super quickly, we cause a lot of problems in our wake because we're just go, 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 go. And
Yeah.
so no style is right or wrong. No style is good or bad. We need a high performing team that knows how to leverage all styles so they can make the best decisions possible.
Yeah. Well, businesses are, at least from my perspective, working with the companies that we're dealing with, the technologies are changing pretty quickly.
Yes.
And so there is an imperative for it's one thing to make a fast decision, but it's another thing to actually make a fast implementation.
Yes.
So
Yep.
they're really two different. Yes, we made a fast decision, but who's executing, who's developing the processes, who's making this. It's one thing to have the idea, but then you got to make it real. Then you got to make it repeatable, and so that you do need the whole team. And just because you made a fast decision doesn't mean that whole team's moving. But if we don't move with a fairly quick pace, the business won't be able to respond. And the bigger the business, the slower the response, the more at risk they become of being supplanted in the marketplace. So I can see where unhinging the stuck points in a team is super important for businesses.
Yes, I agree completely with everything you said. It's, a lot during the pandemic when decisions were just rolling out, 5 times an hour on really big, important things. For my folks who are slower decision makers, I had to communicate with them. A fast decision doesn't mean that it's a rushed or bad decision. And then when there was more time to breathe and make, longer term plans kind of
Yeah.
later in 2020, earlier in 2021, I had to teach my fast decision makers to slow down and breathe again. You can make a
Sure.
decision over the course of 2 days, not 2 hours, because sometimes a decision that takes a while to make isn't a bad decision either. It just demonstrates that you have a lack of patience, which I have a lack of patience. So I totally get it.
So where do you see right now? What are the primary as far as making better decisions, or working in teams, because it's interesting. I was reading. I've always fascinated with Jeff Bezos, and one of the way he holds meetings, I always found really interesting, is that you had to write a memo why you wanted to have the meeting, and then you have to read it. Like the first part of the meeting is reading this memo that could be quite lengthy. And I'm curious, is there a recommended meeting style or cadence that you think gives a framework for people that you like?
I do. Yes. Thanks for that question. I too admire Jeff Bezos's decision-making and meeting style. I was always curious if that memo format flowed throughout the whole organization or if it's just the executive team. I didn't know. And the layer that he put on that too is a team was only as big as a group of people that could share one pizza.
Right.
Because it kept it small, right? And so I think, it depends on what kind of meeting you need. If it's a decision-making meeting, here's what I have to say. If you have to make a decision as a group, you've already got input, you need to bat around pros and cons and what could go right and what could go wrong, kind of that pre-mortem scenario. No more than 4 people. I might let you have 5, no more than 4 people in a decision-making meeting. You need to, of course, have the right people. It needs to be the right length. So don't try to jam a really important topic into a 30-minute meeting. If it needs to be 90 minutes, let it be 90 minutes. In terms of pre and post work, if you are sending out your agendas with enough time for all different personality styles to prepare, and you're making your work visible, like you're an agile shop and you do the Kanban boards and all that good stuff, and people aren't following through, they're not prepping for the meeting adequately, they're not doing the work in between the meetings so that the next meeting can be fruitful, you actually don't have a meeting problem, you have an accountability problem.
Okay. That's huge.
Yeah, it's a very, I think so many folks think that, that's because something was wrong with the meeting. No, it's because you have a culture that lacks accountability.
So how do you coach someone or a team or an individual on how to hold people accountable? Like where do you start with that conversation?
Yeah. So,
I mean, that's a massive topic in of itself.
Oh, huge. Yeah. Huge. And meetings are just a key part of it, So here's where I start with holding people accountable. I love this topic. So my 2 favorite topics to discuss are accountability and conflict. So the things that make everyone's armpits sweat a little bit. I'm like, let's dig in. Let's go. With accountability, I don't believe that we need to hold people accountable. I believe we need to invite them into accountability. Because accountability makes freedom, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of being able to leave work at work, a sense of, I know what high performance is. That's what it makes possible for the individual, for the team, for the entire organization. So I say, invite them into the opportunity to be accountable, because it always feels like crap to everybody to be held accountable. I don't know a manager that's like, I love to hold people accountable. And an employee who's like, I love for my manager to hold me accountable. It feels like junk. And so we have to remember that the accountability is the other person's responsibility, not the manager's. And so I define accountability as do what you say you will do when you say you will do it. With quality, right? And so always promising and delivering on expectations. So I train my cultures that we work with. It's not, I'll get you that report. It's, I will get you that report by next Friday. And here's what success looks like. It will have these components. And if I get stuck, I will come see you so that by next Friday, we have a piece that we can move forward on. That's accountability. More cultures need that thorough decision-making to have accountability.
That is huge. That is so huge. And it's such a big topic, but it's something that we're reverse engineering even within our own. And it's interesting. Someone's butt in a seat that you can visibly see does not. It's almost like the culture we're in right now. Not every business is that way. Like we're all back to work physically, but we do have some remote workers now because the opportunity presented itself to find some talent outside of our 4 walls.
Yes.
But the sloppy management that of someone's button a seat does not mean someone's accountable to the work. And so it's almost like, well, just because someone's there, it seems like the sloppy manager is being exposed as much as the is accountability. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Oh, could not agree more. I'm going to take it a level higher. It's
Okay.
sloppy goal setting. It's sloppy strategy definition from the top all the way down. No one knows what success looks like besides, look, you can see my butt in the chair. Like, hopefully they're not looking at their butt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
Yeah, no, I think it's sloppy organizational vision setting, mission definition, strategy, and strategic execution that you're seeing become very visible because it's not cascading down.
Yeah, I heard this a long time ago. Leader of one, leader of many. If you can lead one, you can lead any. And I'm just wondering how many percentage of people that you work with, leaders, like the ones that are actually calling for the meeting and asking for the meeting, actually go into the meeting with an agenda and have set people up for that agenda ahead of time. I'm just curious, and as at a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being like everybody that you walk into is doing that, 0 being no one is. Like where do people, and not after you work with them, like when you go in, what do you think what is it at? 2. I mean, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That is so crazy. I mean, and there's some folks that, of the coaching variety, probably you're this way as well. They're the way like, we don't have meetings unless there's an agenda ahead of time, like a week ahead of time.
Yes.
I mean, to now it's not drive-by management. I'm just going to pause there and let you pontificate for a moment on that.
Okay. So many thoughts there. So first off, I think I always advocate outcome-based agenda, meaning don't list the topics we're going to discuss. That's not enough for people to have the context and the understanding of what needs to happen in this meeting. Is it an information sharing meeting? Is it a brainstorming meeting? Is it a decision-making meeting? Is it a postmortem?
Okay.
What you have to define what kind of meeting it is so people understand how to best participate. There's definitely that piece of it. The other thing that I get really worked up about with meetings is when you do the math about what a meeting costs an organization, those numbers are really, really high. And especially if you're talking about the top level leadership of your entire organization, of your function, that is the most expensive time y'all will spend because you're all together. In theory, you shouldn't be doing anything else, but that's really expensive time, which means it needs to be your most valuable use of time. And so if it's really valuable use of time, you all should come out of there on fire. Like, oh my gosh, here are all the things we're going to do and need to be done because we were together. And these meetings easily add up to over thousands of dollars an hour, right? They're not making $1,000 an hour decisions in there. That's not what's happening usually. I wish that it was. And if you're doing that, like reach out to me, brag on yourself. I want to hear it. But then the ramification of that too is so many leaders aren't starting their real work until after 5 because everybody's gone, or they're getting up super early to do their deep work because they don't have distractions and they don't have meetings. And these managers are just running from meeting to meeting to meeting and having pork rinds for lunch. Like, we've got to get off the little hamster wheel of this stuff so we can do deep work and thoughtful work together and valuable work together. Not just run from meeting to meeting to meeting, which takes us back to our initial conversation about consensus. We use meetings to get consensus. And so we just stay in this loop of meeting, get buy-in, get buy-in, get buy-in. No one makes a decision. So we have to have another meeting because people forgot to do their action items 3 months later. So I'm getting real excited to hit my microphone, but this is what we're doing to ourselves. So we're taking time away from our family. We're hurting our mental health. We're taking away from our feeling of accomplishment, all for the sake of showing up for a meeting. It breaks my heart at the end of the day. Honestly, it really does, because it's such a bad habit that has some really expensive ramifications.
Yeah, we're and this is such hard work to do. At least my experience of it is it's very, very, it's the most beneficial work that we've done in 20 years, but we're going to get to the point in 2023 where everyone is going to have a number. everyone will have a number in the whole company. But we're not at that point because we're just working with like the top group just to make sure that we know where we're going, and that we can even have the chance of being able to assign a number to make sure that everybody is a part of this dream team that is being built. And but the sense of what I've already seen, and this is a sense of accomplishment people feel when they do have that accountability, and they can actually have something to manage themselves against. And it's quite an exercise to go through. And so I'm empathetic to the people going through it right now, and because it is so powerful, and you can impact people in so many different levels, because those meetings can go down in number because it's the clarity is so clear for everybody.
Yes. And just curious, when you say they have a number, what do you mean by, like, what's the context for the number?
Like every department that has every function that is contributing to the business, that everybody knows what the definition of success is. They like, and it's not like a wishy-washy feeling. It is that, but it's actually a binary number that contributes to some meaningful metric at the top.
Gotcha.
Some meaningful scorecard item, like customer satisfaction or a revenue or an expense, or something that is meaningful towards what we're moving towards. So,
yes.
So that's what I meant by that.
Gotcha. That's what I thought you meant, but that's perfect. Yeah. Everyone wants to know what winning looks like, right? Like, that's what we want to know, is what does winning look like, versus don't send me out in the desert to wander by myself for 40 years. Like, I don't know where I'm going. So,
well, I love to figure out a way to wrap this up with some real value for leaders that are listening to this. And I'd love to get your thoughts on kind of this 80-20 principle that I believe in. Like, what is the 20% like that a leader that you think right now by that you try to elicit with them? So what's the superpower that you really lean into yourself, that you really try to extract from a leader, someone who's managing, whether it's an owner or an executive? What if there's anything you could get out of anybody, what do you try to focus on in that 20% that you know that will get 80% of the result?
Oh gosh. So I would say my superpower is listening, where I hear what's being both said and unsaid. And because I know why people do and don't change, I can connect dots in a way that our folks can't yet, and I hope to teach them to do. When it comes to how to use 20% of your time to have 80% of the impact, I'm going to advocate for every leader listening in, spend the first 20% of every single workday, and so thus the 20% of every week, being completely unavailable to anybody else and doing your deepest, most important work.
I love that.
Yeah, don't start your day with emails. Don't start your day with the Slack messages. Don't start your day with whatever dings and pings and gets your attention to other people's priorities. Start with the work where you add the most value and be unavailable to people. And then if the day goes off the rails, you've already got the amazing stuff done. Let me say it this way. When the day goes off the rails, you've already gotten really important work progressed for your team, for your organization, for yourself.
So that could be an 8-hour day. That's the 20% of 8, 20% of 10, 20% of 12, whatever that means, but put that in the front of the day.
Yeah. I'm sure these executives listening in, pull a 10-hour day on the regular. All right. So first 2 hours of every single day, make it about where you add the most value.
Yep. Because that's what the IT leaders if you spend that 20% to what's the biggest impact that you can bring to the organization, you're going to drive that lens instead of being playing whack-a-mole with all your problems throughout the day. You're going to focus that into, okay, what's that clarity that's going to bring the maximum impact to my team, to my business, to the results. That's great.
Yes, absolutely.
So Stefanie, as we wrap up, is there anything that you wished I had asked that I didn't, that you would like to bring up? Or do you feel like we covered all the major items? Or you're just like, Bill, I wish you'd brought this up. I'm going to wrap up with this point.
like to wrap up with. I think if folks are listening in, I think we brought up a lot of pain points and a lot of possible solutions. And so folks are like, okay, Stefanie, I want to take your advice in one of these areas. I can't tackle this all at once. No expectations. Start in the next right place for where your team is. I'd love if folks considered me to help them, but you are already a successful leader. You have a successful team. Don't get bogged down into, oh my gosh, there's so many problems to solve and there's so many solutions we could use. Because I'm certainly not all of it, or my firm isn't. But the reality is like, just start where you are. Start with one small thing. If it's, you shift up your agenda for your staff meetings, practice that, do that. If, it's inviting people into accountability in simple ways, start there. Don't get lost in the big solution of all the things that need fixed for your team. Just do the next right thing. Do the next right thing, do the next right thing.
Cinch by the inch, hard by the yard.
That's right. Yeah.
For everybody, I'm going to have on the blog post you can reach Stefanie so she can work with your teams. Has a lot of background working with my audience, and so I will highly encourage everybody to reach out to her, and I'll put links to her website and how you can reach her on LinkedIn. All right, Stefanie. Well, thank you very much for your time today.
Oh gosh, thank you, Bill, so much.